Hi, Karen.
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, all good, thank you. Yeah,
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, ready for another workshop?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, thank you very much.
Okay.
I think I'll have some load shedding now. So I'll just
Oh,
make you co-host and then I'll switch to my phone. But I do have my phone with me and I'm charging it now.
okay, sure thing, no problem. Have okay, I can share screens, is that correct? Just as long as I can share the screen, that's really what I need, what I really urgent, what I do need to do, and that's about
Yes,
it.
I
But I
just made
suppose,
you co-host.
okay, so if I'm co-host, then it's also more possible, yes. Okay, perfect. Thank
Yes,
you.
and I think your network is cutting a bit. So your messages are delayed on my side.
Oh dear. Okay. Well, I hope my load shedding doesn't cause grief. Oh dear. Um, can you not hear me very clearly?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Okay. I'm hoping that it'll be if I do go funny, then please just message me or something, because we've also got load shedding here where I'm sitting, so it's a bit of a problem. Ugh.
No, I think we can hear you now.
Okay.
I
Good.
just need to make a link quickly. I'll be back now.
Okay. Sure. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again on today's workshop hosted by the Center for Postgraduate Studies. Joining us today is Professor Karen Bradshaw, who is a professor in the Department of Computer Sciences. She has been using latex for many years as her main scientific paper and thesis writing tool, and has introduced it to all her postgraduate students over the past 16 years. Professor Bradshaw will be talking to us about how to use JabRef as well as latex in our research journey. Just before handing over to you, Prof, just to alert the participants here today, I will be posting a link in the chat section, which is leading you to an evaluation form for you to please evaluate this workshop and many other workshops that we are hosting at the Center for Postgraduate Studies, so that we can actually see where we can assist more, where we can fix, and also where we can work together. The form is anonymous. We won't be able to see who has sent the comments. Thank you very much, Karen, for joining us, and over to you for this workshop.
Thank you very much for having me and for hosting me. And yeah, I'm hoping that we'll have some fun time together where we learn a little bit more about not having to use Word and various of the other tools that you're possibly using at the moment. And yeah, as the introduction said, I have introduced this to all of my students, and it's always a little bit of a learning curve when they first start using it, because it's not quite as intuitive as using Word as your editor. But once you've actually got the hang of it, and you can start very small and start doing very simple things first, and then learn as you go along. So you can actually get a document up and running quite quickly. And then if you want to do fancy stuff, you can sort of learn it bit by bit later. So it doesn't have to be all learnt in one go. So what I've got is I've got a little document that I will also make available at the end in a zip file, the document that I'm going to be working with you and showing you what bits and pieces do. And then you can use that kind of as your starting point and keep going from there. So we're going to cover two tools today. We're going to cover first a reference manager tool, which is called JabRef. And JabRef is a very small download. It's a very simple piece of software that you put onto your computer. And you can then load it and run it from anywhere, basically. So it's a small tool, but it's a very simple reference manager, and it works very well with the other tool that I'm going to be talking to you about. And that the other tool is obviously the latex, which is the word processing software, or the language. It's actually a language that we're going to use to create our documents with. So I'm going to start off with JabRef, and I did initially in the introduction, or in the poster for this talk, I gave you a URL where you can actually download it and install it on your systems. And I'm going to just turn off my camera because I don't want to overload. I'm also sitting in load shedding at the moment. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to turn off my video. And I will be then sharing a screen. And the first screen that I'm going to share with you is, well, it's quite a complicated screen. But it's the one that's going to show you what JabRef is all about. So let me just get rid of all of these others on the screen so it doesn't complicate matters. There we go. So you should now be seeing a screen, and I'm hoping I'm sharing. Hold on, let me just start again. I'm not 100% sure which I've got. Let's just get to that one. Actually, I'm just going to share that. There we go. Okay. So what you can see now in my screen sharing is the JabRef app, basically the piece of software that you can see me. And this is where we're going to store our references. So this is a tool that every researcher has to have. You've got to have a way of keeping track of all your references. And there's a whole lot of other tools out there. There's things like Mendeley, there's Zotero, a whole host of other reference tools. But this one I like because it's a very simple tool and it's a standalone tool and you don't need a license to use it. You can install it on your own machine and it's very simple to use. So it's pretty much just a bibliography manager that allows you to set up a file. And you can, the file that I've set up here that I'm using is a file called test.bib. So all the files that get created by this JabRef tool all have the extensions .bib. So I can show you if we wanted to start from scratch, which you would probably have to do, is you go to File and you ask it to create you a new library. And you can then, at some point, which is probably a good thing now, is just to save the library straight away. And then it'll ask you to save it as something because it hasn't got a name. And I can say I want to save it as, and then I can give it a name. I'll call it the workshop library for want of a better name. And it's sitting in one of my folders. You can choose whichever folder you want it to sit in. You can change that and you can save it wherever you want. And now you can see that it's got a title here, the top here, called workshop.bib. And this is now my new library that I can start putting in some publications that I need to store. And the plus here is the way to go about starting to set up a new entry. We call these the entries in our library. So we're going to have a whole lot of entries in our library. And if I click on a plus sign here, at the bottom, right at the bottom, you'll see that there's required fields. And for those of you who have already stored some things in reference managers, you know that things that are important, the fields of the thing that are important are things like the author of the work, the title, where the journal is that it was published in, what the year was that it was published, etc. And then there's some optional fields. If I click on here, you can store additional things about this article. For the moment, I've chosen an article style, but we can also, if you click on the, not the plus, but the 3 lines and the plus, there's a whole lot of different kinds of entries that you can use. So there's not just articles, there's books. So if you're storing a reference about a book, you would obviously click on, I want a book entry. Or if you're storing a reference about that comes from a conference proceedings, then you would click on an in proceedings entry. And then you would see different kinds of required fields and different kinds of optional fields. And here where it says article, it would obviously say something different. So we don't only deal with articles, but I'm going to start with the article entry because that's kind of the more typical one. So let's just cancel that and I'll come back to that a little bit later. So in the required fields, you could, of course, go and type all the information in. And this is the slow and old-fashioned way of doing it, but I'm going to show you how you could do it in case that's how you choose to do it. But when I show you the quicker way, you'll probably change your minds very quickly. So if you had an article that was written by some authors, well, maybe me. Let's try an article written by myself. And then I can have, there's the author. And if there were 2 authors, I could possibly put in somebody else's name as well. This is one of my students. And maybe the title of the journal article that we wrote was drone capture of images. And the journal that we published in was the Happy Days Journal. This doesn't really exist, but I'm just making up some information so that I can show you how easy it would be to put it in. And the year that we published this was in 2020. And the one thing that is important in this JabRef entry, so this entry for this journal paper, is this thing called a citation key. And this is something that that would make sense to me, because when I want to cite this article, this is what is going to link up the citation that I make in the LaTeX tool to the citation that's stored in this library. So I'm going to call this the drone 20 paper. So this is the paper that I refer to as my drone 20 paper. And we might like to fill in some optional fields. Maybe there was a volume of this journal, Happy Days Journal, and it might have been volume 13, and maybe it was number 2. And we always like to keep track of the page numbers, because that's something that's important for referencing when we need to put it into our reference list. And this pages was from 23 to 29. And then I could then go and look at the DO, at least the general field. There's a whole lot more information that I could store. So I could store the DOI. I'm not going to put a DOI in because I don't think I can make that up correctly. I could also store some keywords that maybe later when I need to look for articles. So this would be something like drone. And this was all about images. So maybe I'll put in 2 keywords. And I could also put a URL in if there was a place, you know, where I found this article. And I could also even go so far as to maybe at this stage not hand type it, but I might just copy paste and put the abstract in if I want to keep that all here correctly in this one place. But I think that's probably enough for now. And you can see that while I was typing, what was happening at the top here was that some of the information was being filled in the main information. So the entry type, which is an article, the authors in this case, Bradshaw and James, the title of the article, the year, where it was published, and that then becomes my first entry into this library that I've called the workshop.bib. And to make sure that I don't lose any work, every now and then I just click on Save Library, and then you'll see that the little star that was here, which means that there was unsaved work, has now gone away. So now I've got an entry, my first entry into my library of references that I'm keeping. So let's make one more perhaps. Let's add maybe not an article, but let's see what others they've got. They've got a master's thesis, there's a PhD thesis, there's a conference, there's an in collection. So there's an electronic, and this is a good type of entry to use if you've got a URL or an online based entry. So let's perhaps take an in proceedings and just see what the difference is in the required fields. So we'll go back to the required fields and you'll see that pretty much it's the same as what the other one was. And I might just add another article in here. And this title of this conference in proceedings conference paper was something about nothing. And the title of this conference proceedings was the proceedings of the 8th conference, can't spell, on nothing. And the year was 2023. And again, I need to give some kind of a citation key because that's really important. And the citation key that I might remember here would be nothing 23. Just helps me to kind of remember. Sometimes people also like to use author names, so I might call this the Brad 23 paper. So it depends how you want to try and remember your references, etc. And we could go and fill in a whole lot of optional fields at this case. the Springer might have been, at least the publisher might have been Springer. There might have been an editor. There might have been in the series, and that's all information that we could fill in. But you can see now, as I've been typing again, my second entry has appeared at the top here. So this is all very well and good, but it does take a lot of effort from us. And there's a much quicker way of actually getting your entries into this JabRef manager. So let me just for the moment stop sharing here. And let's go to an internet connection. And let me just find something that has got where I can start. Okay, and so let me just give you this sharing. I'll share my internet screen. All right, I'm not sure how many of you know about Google Scholar as a search engine for academic papers, but I use it a lot. Google Scholar is really quick and good at finding the things I need. And if you type in some keywords of what you want to go and search for, perhaps you want to, I always just use the standard one that I'm kind of always searching for is agent-based modeling. That's one of my research topics. And I then give it, go away and find me documents, articles, and these are all scholarly articles. So you tend to not get all the rubbish that you do if you just search in normal Google or Firefox or Bing, etc. You can, this is what where they're searching for Google Scholar is they're searching in scholarly repositories. And so you get much less rubbish to sift through. So here, for example, is a tutorial on agent-based modeling and simulation. And maybe that's what I'm looking for. So if I open it up, I have already opened it up. What you typically would find is something like this. This is a IEEE repository where this article has been published, or this tutorial has been published. And most of these websites like this would have something like a cite this. They'd have a button here that says, how would you cite this document that you're looking at now? So if you click this, it normally gives you a whole lot of different ways that you could cite it. So there's a reference, a citation just using plain text, and that's what it would look like. And then next to it, there's a tab that says, what would this citation look like if you were using BibTeX? Now, BibTeX is the format that JabRef uses. So when JabRef stores its bibliography, its library, it stores it in this format that is called BibTeX. And I should have actually showed you that just before I came to this next point. So I'm just going to whip back and show you what, I just have to find an editor now. So there's an editor screen. And this screen that I'm showing you now is just showing you what a file test.bib looks like. And in fact, if I want to show you the file that we've just created, which was called workshop.bib, I can open that one for you as well. And there you can see the article that I entered by hand, painstakingly, making quite a lot of mistakes as I went along. But there you can see there's an article. It's what I called, my key was called Drone 20. And there the authors, there's the journal name, this is the title, this is the year, there's the number of the article or of the volume, there's the page numbers, and even there's the keywords that I typed in. Now you'll notice that it didn't add the second one that I typed in, the in proceedings entry, and that's because I didn't save it. I didn't do a save after I'd finished, so I'm just going to do the save and it says do I want to reload it because it's changed? And now you'll see that there's the second entry. It's just text. It's text that we can all read. It's not a fancy format. It's just got specific little lines and things. And this is exactly how JabRef will store every single entry, every single reference entry that you put into it. And the format that this is using is, in fact, the JabRef format. So this is what it looks like in the file. What you see, of course, is the interface that I showed you a little while ago when I was entering entries. So now that we've seen that the file that JabRef creates is just a text file in a specific format, let's go back and look at our entry that I was Googling for. And I've lost it. Let me just find it again. And let's share that screen. And so here is my Google Scholar screen. And what you see here, where it says, how do I cite this article that I've picked up here? It says, I asked it to give me the format in BibTeX. And this is exactly the same format that I've just showed you as what the other entries looked like, the ones that we entered by hand into our JabRef application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. I'm going to copy this whole thing, this whole entry here. And this is the quick and easy way of putting in new entries into your JabRef. Now, the one thing you must take note of before you go back to your JabRef application is just look and see what kind of an entry it is. And there it tells us it's an in proceedings entry. So just recall that. I've copied this. So now I'm going to stop sharing this. And I'm going to go back to my JabRef entry or my JabRef screen, which I've just lost for the time being. There we go. So now I've gone back to my JabRef screen. And there's a much quicker way of adding this information. So I again go and create a new entry because I want to store this new stuff that I've just found on the internet. And I create an in proceedings entry. Why am I creating an in proceedings? Because that was the entry information that I copy pasted, or that I copied and I'm now going to paste. So I create myself a blank in proceedings. Here's the blank in proceedings line in the blue. And at the bottom here, you can see there's nothing in it. There's just blank. But instead of me now typing it in, I'm going to go to the tab on the rightmost side on the bottom right of this application screen. And I'm going to look at it and it says, here's a place where I can just copy paste, or at least I can paste in BibTeX source. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take out what's already there. And I'm going to paste what I had. It seems to have lost it. Paste, Control V, doesn't want to. Okay, don't worry. I'll just go and copy it again. Really didn't like my copy to the keyboard. I'm just going to copy it. There we go. And let's see if it'll like it now. There we go. So what I've done is I've just taken the information that I got from Google Scholar and I've pasted it into this tab called the BibTeX source. And there it looks exactly like the source that was in the Google Scholar page or the listing, but it also looks very similar to the source of the text that I showed you in my editor. And if you now go back into the required fields, you'll see that all of the author information has been put in the right place. The title has been put in the right place. The proceedings name has been put in the right place. The year. Let's see what optional fields have been put in. Oh, there's a pages that they've half entered. Remember, sometimes these citation sources that you pick up off the internet aren't altogether exactly 100% correct. So it's always a good idea just to double check that all the information you've put in is perhaps correct. And clearly it's not just one page, but maybe it is. So we might want to just trim that a little bit and just leave it at that. And there might be some general information. Yes, there's a DOI that's been put in for us. There's no abstract. But I want to just go back to the required fields. When you pick things up off the internet, the citation keys that they use are very unspecific. And so instead of trying to remember that this is citation 1574234, you can just give it your own key. So I would normally just put this down as McCall 05, and then I know that it's a paper by McCall and it was published in 05. So you can make subtle changes, but by just literally dumping the source into this BibTeX source tab, you've saved yourself a lot of effort in creating another new entry. So we can do one more just so that we're happy with this way of doing it. So let me just go back to my Google screen. Let's go back. Here's a different article that I found at some point. Well, it's not actually an article, it's actually a survey article. And I picked this up, and well, you look at it and you go, well, there's nothing much about the citations on this article. But if you look a little bit closely, you'll see this entry here. It says, for information about citing, click here. So let's click here. And we get a whole lot of information that looks a lot more exciting. And here you can see there's a standard form of citation. This is just a text form. But here we go. Here is a BibTeX bibliography file format. So what I can do is I can copy this whole piece, everything there. And if I just do copy, and I take note of what type of reference or citation it is, and I see at the top here it's an article. So I know now that if I want to go and create an entry in my JabRef, I need to go and create an article entry. So let's go and do that. And let's hope this time I've actually copy pasted correctly. And let me just share this other screen, which is this one. So let me go and create a new article entry. And you can see there's the required fields. It's very blank to start with. But if I click on the right, bottom right here, here's space for my, what I can copy paste. So if I just do a paste there, ooh, I've got a whole pile of information I've just dumped into it. So there's the title, the author. And in this case, they've even given me the abstract. So I've even got a copy of the abstract. So if I go to the abstract tab, there is the abstract for this article that I copy pasted. If I go to the required fields, there are all the authors. There's the title of the article. There's the journal it was published in. And this citation key is actually quite useful. It's Heath 2009. Which is kind of very similar to the way that you might be doing them if you're using authors and dates. And you can see at the top now, your article entry has been filled in. And with two very quick clicks of the mouse buttons, I've copied, I've pasted, and I've got a whole lot of information, including an abstract, in my JabRef entry. And if we just have to remember, we must just save our library away. And if we want to make sure that The text file is also looking like it should. Let's just go and open up the text screen, the editor screen again. And let me just share that one. And there's my editor screen. And I have updated it. There's my workshop.bib file. And here's the first article I hand typed in. Here's an in proceedings I hand typed. And here's my in proceedings, an article that I picked up automatically from the web with all of the information exactly similarly to what I typed. So besides making it a lot quicker and easier, it also just means that you get the stuff directly from the source. But as I said, it's always a good idea just to double check that there aren't mistakes or they haven't left out some important information. So it's good to just check it before you sort of walk away completely. But what we've now done is we have created our first library of references. And the first library of references is this one called workshop.bib. And it's now got 4 references in it that if I were writing an article, I could cite them. And I'm going to now go across to the other tool that we're going to look at. And that's the LaTeX tool, to show you how we might actually do something like put it into this. Okay, I see there is a question in the chat. What happens if you can only download the BibTeX file? Not sure I quite understand. What do you mean by the BibTeX file? And what do you download? Because we're not really, what we're downloading off the internet is just the citation of a particular paper. I'm not sure if you're trying to refer to the application. The download of the BibTeX file. Yeah, I really don't understand which file we're talking about. Sorry, can you give me a little bit of information? Or even if you just unmute and can you unmute? Yeah, okay, go for it.
Sorry, I might not have said the right word. Can you hear me?
Sorry, I can. Yes, indeed. Go ahead.
It's when I go to one of my articles online, it doesn't give me an option to copy like you have done and insert it into the program.
Okay.
It only downloads a file.
Okay, I understand. No problem. You can just open that file using Notepad or something. And then once you've opened it, it's just text. And you can then just copy the text out of that. So if it downloads it, you can even open it in Google, in fact, in one of your, in your browser, and you can just copy it out. As soon as you've got it somewhere where you can see the text, you just copy it. And the quickest way of maybe seeing the text is by using Notepad or WordPad, which are standard on most Windows systems or any other editor that you've got, and it'll just give you the text. So then you can do a copy of it and dump it in via the system.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, all right, sure. Okay, all right. So we've now got a whole lot of references in, but I'm now going to show you our next tool that we're going to want to be looking at, and that is, in fact, our LaTeX application. Okay, let me just go here. Just got to find it. There we go. Too many screens open. Okay, so LaTeX used to be quite complicated and difficult to run and to use because we used to have to download a whole lot of files and install a whole lot of things, and really it was quite a complicated process. But nowadays, there's a wonderful LaTeX sharing free system that's called Overleaf. So Overleaf is just a browser. It's just an application that you can open. It's just a website that you go to. And the website itself is just www.overleaf.com, which I also think I did put into the project poster, or at least into the workshop poster. And you do have to sign up, but anyone can sign up. And you can then create LaTeX documents. So LaTeX is a kind of a command language to format your document. So it's not like Word. Word is known as a WYSIWYG system. So WYSIWYG system, and I'm going to just type that into the chat. It goes W-Y-W, WYSI, no, sorry, what, I can't. There we go, WYSIWYG. And WYSIWYG stands for what you see is what you get. Let's just enter that. So Word is what we call a WYSIWYG application. It's a formatting system that as you type and as you make things bold, or as you change the format of the thing or change the color of the font, you can see immediately what you've done. So that's called a WYSIWYG system. LaTeX is not like that. LaTeX, you tell it that for this line, I want you to make it bold. Or for this word, I want you to put it in italics. And you don't see it straight away. You can see the command is next to the word, but you don't actually see the word go into italics. So that's the one difference between something like Word versus LaTeX. But the other thing about LaTeX, which is the advantage of it, is that you've got pre-created templates. So if you want to create a thesis, for example, and there's a pre-created template, then all of the formatting is kind of taken care of you behind your back. So you don't have to decide that this heading must be font 12 and Roman times, whatever font you want. So LaTeX has a lot of advantages, and that is very much the case that when you also submit papers to conferences or to journals, quite often they provide you with a template. So you just really have to fill in your content in amongst this template. And when you then render the document, it comes out beautifully. And if you make changes, it just repaginates and it reorders and it reformats, and everything just comes out beautifully. So once you get over the hurdle of understanding a few commands, it actually really does save time in the long run. Formatting theses is probably one of the biggest nightmares of anyone's life. And a lot of time can be spent on moving this picture just a little bit up or a little bit down or onto the next page. And then when you put some more text in, then the picture's in the wrong place. So you then have to move it around again. And that kind of stuff gets taken care of by the LaTeX system itself. So what I've got in this overleaf.com, this is once you've signed in and you've got a sign in, then you can end up with all of the projects. So a project is just a document that you're creating. And you can have your own projects. You can also share projects with others. If you're using the free version of Overleaf, I think you can only share with one other person, which is quite perfect. If you've got a supervisor and you writing the document, your supervisor can then see exactly what you're doing, and you don't have to print parts of your thesis and send them to them, because they can just log in, and actually if you've shared it with them, they can even make comments on the system. And I'll show you how that looks in a little bit as well. So you can have your own projects. You can have projects that others have created but shared. And so, for example, here I've got a little project, which is a little example paper, which I've already created. And I This is the content that I'll make available after the talk as well. And if I go into this paper, my example paper, you'll see that the screen is kind of cut in half. So on the left side of the screen is what looks a little bit like computer programming, but it's not. It's just the language. It's the LaTeX language. And unfortunately, there's always quite a lot of stuff that has to go at the top of your document. But once you've got one template, and this is a template for like an article kind of style. Once you've got one example, you can then just use that example and change the content. And we'll work through what's in this document in a bit. On the right-hand side, make it a little bit bigger, you'll see that this is what the document actually looks like. So what's on the left here gets turned into this on the right. So this is a little example paper that I've written and taken various bits from various other places, just to show you all kinds of different things that you might want to do when you're writing a paper, for example. So when you're writing a paper, if we look at the right-hand side here, you'll see that there's typically something that would be the title of the paper, so your paper. And the way that we get that is by changing information on the left. So let's start at what goes on the left, right at the top. And the first thing that ever has to happen in a LaTeX paper is you have to specify what kind of a document you're creating. Now, there are a whole lot of inbuilt kinds of documents. There's things like articles, and that is in fact what this is. It's just an article type. There's then things like a report. So I'm just going to show you briefly, if I were to change this article into a report, nothing happens yet, because what has to happen is you have to re-render this thing on the right. And you do that by clicking this green button. So I've just changed one word on the left. And let me show you what it actually comes up with. And it puts it into a completely different style. Now you can see that this is looking like a report, because the title page is like a separate page. And if we then scroll down, we'll see that on the next page, you've got the abstract separated. And if we keep scrolling down, we've then got the content of the paper over there. And if we keep scrolling down, you'll see that the bibliography is now on a separate page. So by just changing a single word, we've changed the look and feel of this document completely. There's also a book kind of a package that we could turn this into. So if we recompile it, obviously we might not have it altogether correct. And I see we've got a few errors here already. Oh, it tells me there's a whole lot of stuff that it doesn't like, because it wasn't really created for a book. So let's just look. It doesn't do much difference to what a book would have looked, or at least what a report looks like. But this wasn't really written as a book. But one thing you will note is that the page numbers now are on different sides, because a book typically has left pages and right pages. So you'll notice that some little changes have come into effect. But this hasn't been designed as a book. So I'm going to go back and just put it back to the article, because that's something that we typically write quite a lot. And if you want to change the size of the font in the article, I've currently got this font as, let's just re-render that so we can see it back in the original article format. Okay, there's the article format. And if I want to decide I don't want 10-point font, I want 12-point font because it's too little for me to read, I change the 10 to a 12 and I recompile it. And you should now notice that the font is a lot bigger. So maybe this is better to read and easier to read, so I'll maybe leave it at 12-point font. So by making very small changes, I can re-render this document completely in different ways. There's a little bit of information here about use packages. These packages are things that have come about, that have been created, and they help you to do various things. So for example, if you want to do maths equations, then you normally would use a package such as AMS Maths, because that allows you to do interesting equations. If you want to put graphics into your document, in other words, pictures, then you would normally use the package graphics. There's also a package called to-do notes, and I have actually used them, and you can actually see two examples of the green and the orange up here, where if you're writing something and you want to remember to come back to it and to fix it or to change it, you can also then leave yourself a little comment by saying, fix this later or something like that. And to do that, you can use this package called to-do notes. So the orange and the green here are examples of this to-do notes, and I'll show you later how we got them. So these are normally packages that are pretty standard. Once you've written one paper, you pretty much know what you might use in your papers, because obviously if you're doing equations, you would need different packages to if you're not doing equations. Then the next command comes is the title of the paper. And this is where we get whatever the title of our paper is. So if my title isn't your paper, I could change it to be the title of Drones Capturing Images. And nothing changes until I re-render it. And there's the re-rendering. And now I've got Drones Capturing Images is now the title of my document. And there's my author names. And if I wanted to put another author in, I can put in something like that. And again, if I re-render it, I should get the two authors in. Okay. We don't often want to have a date. The date, unfortunately, is a thing that comes up automatically in this article style. But if you don't want a date, then what you need to do is just put in a comment that says, sorry, not a comment, you have to put in a command that says \date. Anything that starts with a \, is a command in this LaTeX language. So the \date says, put in a date that's got no information in it. And the minute you do that, it will hopefully take away our date. So the date is always put in by default. If you don't want a date for the article style, you just put in a line like this. If you want to comment something out, in other words, you don't want the renderer to see it, what you do is you use the percentage sign. And the minute you put a percentage sign in, you'll see it goes vaguely green. So this is now all green, and it's been taken out, and the renderer won't see it. So it'll ignore anything that's got this percentage sign around it. Now, what you can see what's happening here is every time I type, because I've got track changes as being on, I can actually, if I look at the review button at the top, you can see that everything I've done is actually being tracked. The track changes is on. I can turn it off, and then I won't actually see any of this. And then it'll just, it's still tracking it, but it's not actually going to, it wants me to just accept them. So I'll just get rid of them all. And there we go. And then we can get rid of the review panel. So there is a way of doing track changing, of doing track changes as well. So if you want to, if your supervisor wants to change things for you, they can, or at least make suggestions on your document for you, then they can use it on track changes. Okay, so this is all preamble stuff. This is stuff that kind of has to be there, and it's all sort of kind of pretty standard. So once you've done it once, you can use the same kind of format, and then you can just change what you need to change. When you see the begin document command, there's a begin document, and right at the end, there's an end document. The way that LaTeX works is it works with kind of environments. So the document environment starts with a begin and ends with this end document. And everything that comes in between the begin document and the end document is then basically the content of your document. And the first command that we normally have in the begin, inside the begin document, is something that says make the title. So we've given all the information up here, but if we don't have this make title in it, and I'm just going to comment it out, I'm going to hide it, and I'm going to recompile it, and then we can see what's going to show, and there's nothing at the top. It starts just with the abstract. So the title part, in other words, your names, the author's names and the title have gone away. So if you don't have a make title, it doesn't make a title. So let's put our title back. Okay, then it's got an abstract environment. So here's the abstract environment. It starts with the begin the abstract, and it ends with the end abstract command. So there's an end abstract command, there's a begin abstract. And anything you write inside here, this is more of the abstract. And some more. This will all come into where the abstract gets rendered. So let's recompile it. And now we've got all of our extra abstract in here. And the way it sets it up, how does it know to put abstract in the center? That's information that is stored inside this article style. So whoever designed this article template, they decided that this is how it should look. So they said that what we need is we need the abstract to be in the center, and they want the headings to be in this font, and they want the title of the document to be in that font. So whoever sets up the template decides how all of these formatting things work. We can change small things, like we did change the actual size of the font. So there's a few things that we actually can change, but most of the formatting has been preset by the person who set the template. And that's why a lot of conferences actually create their own templates. So that when you create your paper for a conference, or when you create your journal paper, all of the templates look exactly the same, because you use the template that the publishers have provided for you. So the abstract has its own little environment. Then we get to the sections in the article. So here's section 1, which is the introduction. And the way we introduce new sections is with the command \section. So \section introduction will create exactly that heading over there. And then everything that comes below it is just the text that is in this part of the document. Underneath section header 1, introduction, here's the text. And if you want to make a new paragraph, you just hit new line, and this is a new paragraph, and some more useless information that I am typing. I'm just trying to make a long line here so that you can see paragraph breaks. And another paragraph. So let's render, spell anymore. Let's render that and see what we get. And it takes a little bit of time. Sorry. If you just hit return, it just assumes it's going to be one paragraph. If you put a blank line in between, it assumes that these are all 3 different paragraphs. And if you render it now, you will get 3 different paragraphs. So there's the first paragraph. Here's the second, it's not highlighting very well, the second paragraph, and here's the third paragraph. And you'll see that for this style, this article style, paragraphs other than the first one are all slightly indented. And if you choose a different style of a document, they might do paragraphs differently. They might then put paragraphs all flush to the left and maybe with a line in between. But the good thing about LaTeX too is that if you suddenly put in a whole lot of spaces here and you messed up and you put in a whole lot of spaces there, it ignores your spaces because it knows how text should look, and it actually just writes it beautifully without all of these piles of spaces that you've put in here. So even if you were to sort of really go mad and put things on different lines, it would still just fix it and be really good to you, and it wouldn't really change anything, even though we've made quite a hash of what we wrote on the left-hand side. And it just looks exactly the same. So LaTeX is very good at ignoring multiple lines, ignoring lots of spaces, and it kind of renders it still in the way it thinks it should be rendered. Here's another section header. There's section 2, some LaTeX examples. And now you can see we've also got some subsections. Here's 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. But we never have to remember the numbers of these sections because LaTeX does that for us. We just have to tell LaTeX that we want a subsection here, and we do that by using the \subsection. And then we give it the heading, how to leave comments. And the next time we have a subsection, it knows that this is the next subsection. And so it works out all of these 2.1s and 2.2s and 2.3s all by itself. And if you wanted to change these 2 paragraphs around, I can move this section and just cut it out and go and put it somewhere else. Let's put it down there. And so I've put it over there. And if I now re-render it, it'll work out the numbering, and now how to include figures is first and how to leave comments is second. So you can really move things around without making any changes to numbering. So that makes just writing normal text really easy. But we quite often don't just want normal text. We also want some figures maybe, some pictures perhaps. And in this case, you can see on here that I've put in a beautiful frog picture. And it's made a beautiful caption for me here, figure 1, and it's put my caption that I gave it next to it. So in the same way that you don't have to remember numbering of subsections and sections, you also don't have to remember the numbering of the figures, because it works out that figure 1 is figure 1 and figure 2 is figure 2, just by where they're being placed. So how do we get this picture in here? Well, obviously we need the picture itself. So the picture, if you look right on the left-hand side here, I've uploaded the picture into my overleaf project. So this was just a picture that I had, and there's a little button here which calls upload. So if you want to upload something into it, you can say you want to maybe select something from the computer. And I'm not sure what I've got in terms of pictures on my computer. Let me see if I've got a picture. There's a very funny, well, a very boring picture, but I've just uploaded that from my computer, and now it's available in this project. In the same way, Frog got uploaded into this project, and so Frog is now something that I can use by just calling upon frog.jpg. So let's go back to the main text. The main.txt is the main file. The .txt is the or the designator for a LaTeX document. So to create a figure with a picture like this, I have to use what LaTeX gives me as a figure environment. So here in lines 45 to 50, I've got a figure environment. And environments always start with a begin and end with an end command. So in this case, I want to begin a figure environment. And we quite often want our figures to be centered in the middle of the page. So there's a command called \centering. So if you don't want them to be centered, let me take it out, and I'll just comment it out by putting a percentage sign in front of it. Now the renderer will ignore the centering. And now you can see, as it was before, the picture is nicely in the middle of this page. If I now recompile my document or re-render it, you'll see it's just put it on the left. So if you don't center it, it just comes on the left because that's kind of the default position. So I prefer it in the middle, so I'll put the centering back. How does it know what document or what figure it needs to put? Well, we tell it to include the graphics. What graphics? We tell it to include this thing called frog.jpg, which is just a file that exists up here in our project. Obviously, we have to upload it into our project. If it's not in our project, it's not going to be able to be included. If we didn't have all of this gumph here that says width is half of the text width, we would have a very big frog picture. And I can show you what would look like if we didn't have any scaling of the picture. So I'm just going to copy that line again so that I don't have to type too much. And then I'll get rid of all of this gumph and show you what happens if I don't scale the picture. I'm just saying, take the picture and dump it into the document. And let's see what happens. Ooh, a bit large. Okay, so what's happened here is that the picture was rather large and it's made it a huge page picture, which is not really what I wanted. So you can put in scaling. So scaling means make the picture smaller. And the scaling that I've used specifically here, because the picture was quite large, is I've said make the width of the picture half of what the text width is. So whatever the text width was, I want you to make the picture half. So it's effectively going to look to half of the size. And that's pretty much what we had. So let's just go back and get that again. Okay, so there's my picture, my frog. If you put two frogs side by side, it would be pretty much half the width of what the writing is over here. So this include graphics command tells you what to put there. And it could be a graph image, it could be whatever image you want to put, you can dump it into here. And then the caption command, this is where you write what the caption must be. So whatever I want to come down here, that's what I write as the caption. I don't write figure 1 because the system knows that it's a figure, because it's in a figure environment, and it will put in the figure for us. And then there's one more thing. There's this label command. Quite often in our text, we want to refer to our figures. And if we give our figures a name, so this figure environment is called figure frog. And I think I might have somewhere referred to this figure. Maybe I haven't. Yes, I have. And there's a little writing over there that says, see the code for figure 1 in this section for an example. And if we look back on the left here, that piece of writing over there that I'm highlighting now, that is created by this piece of writing over here. So it says, see the code for figure. And I don't say figure 1 because this figure might change. I might add in a whole 10 more figures beforehand, and then it'll change. But I refer to its name. I say, look for the reference figure frog. So whatever figure frog has, whatever number has been given to this environment, that's the number that gets put here as figure 1. So putting in figures is really simple. And if you change the order of the figures or you move them around, LaTeX will actually do all of the changes for you behind your back. Okay, I'm going to skip over the creation of the mathematics because that's not for everybody. But I'd want to look at this part of making tables. So here's a little table at the bottom of this page. How would you do tables in LaTeX? Now, there's actually lots of tools on the internet for making LaTeX tables from Excel spreadsheets, where you literally put a table into Excel spreadsheet, and these tools on the internet like LaTeX Table Maker and various others will then translate it into LaTeX code, and you can just dump it into an environment for table. So here's a table environment, and you can just dump it in. If you make it in Excel, you can put in the code that one of these other tools on the internet create for you. Or you can make a table by hand. And all that a table is it has a caption. So an example table is just the caption command. You can again use the centering command to make it center in the middle. If you don't want the table to be in the middle, you can just take out the centering command and it should shove it onto the left-hand side automatically. And it has indeed done that. But the caption, it always centers. Captions are always centered in this template type. Then if you want to have your 2 columns and you want to have lines between the columns, you set up a tabular environment and you say that the things on the left, in the first column, you want to justify to the left, and you do that by saying it must be a left justified column. So this tabular piece over here that I'm highlighting tells you that we've got 2 columns. The first column is justified to the left. Then there's a vertical line in between. So that's this line that goes down the middle of this column, in between these 2 columns. And then the second column, we wanted to format to the right. So this quantity name, the quantity word, and everything else in this column are justified towards the right. So they're right justified. everything in this column is left justified, and everything in the second column is right justified. And that we do by L and R, and the fact that there's a line down the middle is because we put a bar there. If I take out the bar on the left, then you'll see that we're not going to have anything go down the middle. Then we've just got two columns without any dividing line down the middle. If I put back the vertical bar, there we go, and you can see that it doesn't matter if I put spaces in here. It's just maybe easier to see a little bit what's going on. If I make this a bit bigger with spaces, then that puts you back the bar in the middle, and you've now got a dividing line. The dividing line, this horizontal dividing line, you get by calling on the command horizontal line or H line. And if you want a double horizontal line, you put another horizontal line in, and now you can change it to being a double line between the top labels and the next command, the next rows. How do you differentiate what goes into column 1 and column 2? You just separate them with this ampersand sign. The widgets at ampersand 42, we'll put them, that widgets into the first column and 42 into the second column. This double line means make a new line effectively. So for tables, it's good to have a proper line break, and then it'll put the next entry immediately below it. If we want to add in a third column, I can just change the specification up here, and I can say I want a third column and I want that to be centered. And let's put lines on either side at the start and the end as well. So I can just change all of that as well while I'm doing it. I obviously need to add in another heading over here. So this is item quantity, and let's just put in size. And then for each of my lines, I need to put in large, some more information, and medium. And let's render what our new column, what our new table looks like. So now you've got 3 columns. This one's centered. Let's center quantity as well. I don't like this right justification. Let's center that as well. And there you can also see we've added some lines at this, on the left and on the right, to make it a little bit more like a table. And if we want to put horizontal lines at the top and the bottom, we can do that as well by just doing H line there. And here we'll just put in an H line as well. And I'll put it onto the new line just so that you can see it. And I think we've made a fairly good looking table now. So tables are something that you pretty much always have to have. So for simple tables, it's quite easy to just do it by hand in your code here. When the tables get a little bit more complicated, it's probably a good thing to just Google for a table maker for LaTeX. So if you Google something like table maker for LaTeX, something like that, you should come up with some options of apps that you can use for free that will then spit out some code that you can just copy, paste, and dump into this environment that you've created here. Okay, before we run out of more time, as I said, I'm not going to go over the mathematics, but there's something that you might sometimes want to make some lists like this, 1 and the 2, or even just bullet points like ... things like that. And that you can do also with various environments. So this numbered one is a thing called an enumerated environment. So there's a begin enumerate and an end enumerate. So this little section of typing that I've got here. And then every line, you call it an item. So you do \item, and like this becomes 1, and like this becomes 2. If you want a list, but without numbers, but just with bullet points, then it's called an itemized list. So you say begin itemize, and then you put in all of your items. So there's coffee and chocolate, and you do an end itemize, and it ends off the environment. And if you want to put in another item, you can add it in, coffee, book, and chocolate. Oops, and let's render that. And you should see that we've now got coffee, book, and chocolate. And if you want to add more lists and you want to change the order, you can just say another thing. And if you put in lots of lines, it doesn't really matter because it ignores your lines. And you can then get a reordered list like this, another thing, and like this. If you want to get 3 little dots, sometimes you need to put that into your text. You get that by calling this command \dots. And then finally, we get to how do we put our references in? How do we... Sorry, I do see a comment saying long tables are a nightmare. Yeah, I absolutely agree. So that's why we use the table makers on the internet. But let's get back to what we're doing. Bibliography. If you want to put citations into a paper, which is pretty normal and it's probably frowned on if you don't, you need 2 commands. You need a bibliography command, and here you give it the name of the library, your JabRef library that you wanted to use. So if I wanted it to use my workshop library, I would type in workshop, but for the moment, I'm going to use a test library called test.bib. Okay, no, let's not use test, because let me show you how you would bring in your library. So if you've got your library created like we did earlier in this workshop, it'll be sitting in your directory somewhere in your workspace, in your files. So what you need to do in order to use the references in that library is you need to upload that file into this project. So I now have to remember where I stored my library, and I think it was in here. Let me just find it. You probably can't see what I'm doing, or do you see the file upload? Perhaps you do. So when I locate where I found it, I can click on, let me just stop sharing and I'll just make sure that you absolutely can see what I'm seeing. There we go. Screen 2 is what I'm sharing. So let me just start that again. Let's just cancel. If I want to upload a new bibliography file, I go and look for it on my computer and try and find out where I stored it. I think it was in here. And when I find workshop.bib, workshop is the BibTeX file that we created earlier in JabRef. I open it, and you'll see that it's put it now in here. And if I click on it, here are all those references that I created earlier today in the workshop. So let's go back to our document text. So what we've got to tell our document is which bibliography file it must use to get the citations. So I've got 2 bibliography files that I've uploaded. So I wanted to use the workshop one that I've just created earlier today in JabRef. So now I've told it where to find my references. And the second command you've got to give it is bibliography style. There's lots of different ways we can put our citations. So our citations could be in numbered form. They could be like, for example, a Harvard numbering, or they could be in author date type forms, which give you the authors and the dates and not just a number. So by changing this name here, and I'll show you just now what happens when we do change it, you can change the way your citations work. But let's first show you how you can actually put citations in. And the way you put a citation in, let's pretend we've got a citation for coffee that we want to put in here. You use the command \cite. And if you're using author date type citations, you can either do a parentheses citation or you could do a text citation. So let's just do a text citation, a parentheses citation, because that's the more common one. And when you then open up the curly brackets, what your system tells you is these are all of the references that it knows about from this workshop bib. So let's pretend that I'm going to cite my 23 Brad 23 paper. So I just literally do that \cite p Brad 23. And now what we're going to hopefully see is after this coffee on the right, there's going to now be a lovely citation. So let us render this. And lo and behold, there's the citation for Bradshaw 2023, which I've now cited as being the citation for coffee. I see I had another citation down the bottom, and it's now given me a question mark here, because that was a citation that came from the difference bibliography file. So let's just change the citation to be one of the ones from the current file that I'm using. And if you recompile it, it'll use a citation from the current library file that I've just told it to use. So I've told it to use the workshop bib file, and now it's found the 2 citations there and there. Now, this is what we call author date type citations. But if you don't want to do author date, you want to maybe do numbered citations like Vancouver style, then what we do is we're going to just cancel out this line because I don't want it to use that one. But let's, for example, use the Vancouver style of citation. And I'm going to recompile it as we've left it here. It's likely not going to work. Oh, it did work. Because sometimes the citations don't understand cite P because they only understand cite. So this one actually did understand cite P, but what numbered citations normally only understand is cite. So if we change this to cite, it would still work, and we change this to cite, because in numbered styles, there's only one way you can cite. You can only cite them by means of numbering, and it should just give us exactly what we had before. If I don't like the Vancouver style, because what happens when you change these styles is it's not only how it cites it, but it also changes how it puts the references at the end. You'll see automatically now, because you've cited 2 articles, it puts those articles that you've cited as part of the references. So it builds up this reference list automatically based on what you've cited. If we want to cite a third thing, let's just fix up this citation and change it to something else. What haven't we cited? McCall. And now you'll see that I've cited a third thing, and it's automatically pulled in the third reference. And there's the citations 2, 3, and 1. If I change the way the style, and I don't want Vancouver style anymore, oops, that's not working, but I use an ACM style, that's another numbered style, ACM. And if I recompile it, you'll see that it might change the way these citations have worked. No, it hasn't changed the way the citations are working, but it's changed the way the references have been put. It's now put all of the authors into capitals, and it's changed around where the date appears, etc. So by just changing the style, you can also change the way that your citations work and the way that your references are formatted. So let me go, this is another author date style, APA-like. Some of you might know the APA style. And let me just put in what we've got there. We'll leave it like it was, and let's see what APA style looks like. And you'll see that the references now have come into this format, but cite defaults to cite T, and that's a textual citation. So if I go and change all the cites to cite P, then we should see them in their normal parentheses format. Let's just re-render. And now you've got the citations all correct in the APA style. And the references have also changed how they've been formatted to suit the APA style. So by making very subtle changes here, we find that we can make very quick changes to our actual document. And I see I've run out of time. Sorry, I talk too much. Are there any questions? I know it's a lot to take in. But what I will do is I'll make these documents available, the bib file, this LaTeX file, so that you can actually go and put it into your own overleaf and you can play. And that's really the way you learn in LaTeX, is just by making subtle changes and actually seeing what it does in your document. If you've got questions, you're very welcome to email me. I'm in the computer science department. Oh, there's a hand. Sorry. Joanna, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, I would like to know, how do I upload my document in that LaTeX?
So into here, you would go back to the starting point and you would say new project. Can you see my, am I still sharing the right thing?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I probably am. So you'd say new project. And if you want a blank project, you would give it a project name. So say my new paper. And then it would create pretty much a blank article. But what you could then do is you could then upload my files. So you could just drag all of my files that I give you into here and then upload them. And then you would pretty much, then what you would do is you would see everything that I had down here. In fact, what I would probably do is just delete that one, because I will give you a main. And then you can just upload absolutely everything I give you into this. You can even put the zip file in here, and it will create you a project exactly like mine. Okay, so you just go new project, and then it will, it will come back and give you something that looks pretty much like my example project here, where you've got all of these documents on the left. Okay, but that's a good question. Thanks for asking it. I forgot about that. Okay, anybody else got a question? As I said, you're very welcome to email me. I'm just k.bradshaw with a normal ru.ac.za. And if you do need some more help to get you going, I'm happy to assist. Okay, so I'll stop sharing. And I think that's all from me for the moment then. I'm not sure. Okay.
Hi, Karen. Thank you so much for this. Thank you so much to everyone that has attended. Unfortunately, because of load shedding, we had less numbers, people leaving. I've been trying to find connection everywhere I can, but thank you so much. It went smoothly. And of course, the recording will be available via our YouTube channel. Please follow our YouTube channel on the Center for Postgraduate Studies at Rhodes University. But nonetheless, send me an email if you'd like to download the recording for yourself. And thank you so much again for joining us today. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks. Bye.